Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Natalie Hale. Natalie is the author of Oh Brother, Growing Up with a Special Needs Sibling. She is an award-winning author, educator, speaking about teaching Down syndrome children to read, and she's the parent of a child with Down syndrome and a daughter who's neurotypical. Natalie lives in LA, quite a long distance from here. So I want to welcome everybody tonight, and Natalie, you go right ahead when you're ready. Natalie, you are muted.
Yeah, I knew that was going to happen.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Wendy. I'm delighted to be here, and I hope that this evening will be of use to all of you who are attending. That's my goal. So I'm not going to say that raising a neurotypical child or children along with a child with special needs is easy. It's anything but. It's complex, sometimes extremely challenging, and every single situation is unique. My son, Jonathan, has Down syndrome. When he was 7, he was additionally diagnosed with severe ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder. He's 37 now. My neurotypical daughter, Rebecca, is 20 months younger, so she is at 35 and a half at the moment. So they were best buddies for the first 5 years. Then his behavior escalated so badly that everything changed. So my daughter struggled with difficult feelings, and she still does at 35. She's still trying to sort it out. As an adult, she went into the related field of ESL. So she first honed those teaching skills at age 3 when she would try to coach her brother's articulation. She could barely pronounce his name, so it came out as Johnson, but she would sit there and try to get him to not inspirate his final S's. So she would coach him saying, balls, Johnson, trains, Johnson. So she enthusiastically tried to fix a problem that actually never got fixed. So as his behavior escalated, and as we struggled to manage it, she also struggled. So when she was around 10 years old, I realized she was deeply in need of some help, some sibling help. So I turned to every book on sibling relationships that was in print. I bought them all. She read them and threw them on the floor, telling me these are useless. They either sugarcoat the problem or they're profoundly depressing. She was right, but that was all that was available at that time. So she needed the book that I didn't write until she was 18. So that book is Oh Brother, Growing Up with a Sibling with Special Needs. Now, for those of you who are very, very sensitive to people first language, I realize the title is not people first. It should have been Oh Brother, Growing Up with a Sibling with Special Needs, but that is so wordy for a title that we said sibling with special needs. I mean, special needs sibling. So I apologize for those who are very, very sensitive to people first language. Anyway, and I wanted to mention that in the book, we were very careful, the publisher and I were very careful not to mention a specific disability. We wanted this to be useful across the board, regardless of what the disability is. So I was very fortunate that the book was purchased by the American Psychological Association under their children's imprint, which is Imagination Press. But I say fortunate because I knew then that it would be therapeutically sound. And in hindsight, I'm grateful that in addition to me having to please the editor-in-chief, like authors do, I also had to please a whole team of psychiatrists. So, and I want to mention, because of that, I want to mention one chapter in particular that I had not included in the original manuscript as I submitted it, but that this team of psychiatrists asked me to write. And that is the chapter that's titled, I'm Not the Parent. This psychiatric team wanted me to include a chapter on the importance of not dumping the parenting load the caregiver load on the sibling. I was so glad they asked for that additional chapter because I think it's profoundly important. It's one of the flags that I will raise as I'm talking tonight. Fortunately, I had raised my daughter that way. I'd been super aware of that. I knew that down the line, after her dad and I had passed on, she was going to have full responsibility for her brother. I did not want her to have to shoulder that burden any earlier. So, and I can count on one hand the times I asked her to babysit her older brother, and I paid her just like I would pay any babysitter. So my goal in writing this book was twofold: to give helpful tips. Each chapter is a tip, and very important to keep it upbeat but real. So addressing both problems that Rebecca had with all the books that were available when she really needed them. They were either sugarcoating, so they were not real, or they were depressing. So I wanted to keep it upbeat but real. So each chapter focuses on a different coping tool. For example, knowing that you're not alone, that other sibs share the same difficulties you do, and connecting with them is a good option. Having regular quality time alone with both parents, feeling free to talk about fears. Well, I have a baby with a disability too. Does that mean that that's what's going to happen to me because my brother is like that, for example? Or also being free to talk about her difficult feelings, negative feelings in a supportive and understanding environment, and more. So there are lots of tips in there. So as we begin our time tonight together, I want to add that I'm familiar with the struggles of other families as well, because for many years I've taught reading to children with Down syndrome and/or autism, frequently the dual diagnosis of DSASD. So this, of course, brought me into contact with a lot of other families and their situation. And here's where I start waving my soapbox flag. I've seen both successes and what I consider tragic mistakes. The most saddening mistake that I have seen involves families that let the child with special needs run the family, run the household, cause an enormous amount of suffering to siblings and parents. When the child with disabilities is allowed to rule the family unchecked, I consider that tragic. And I know it's difficult. I know it. We lived with it. But that's what special services and respite care are for, and qualified therapy helps. But for parents who are adverse to getting yet another evaluation to get done, to get yet another label in addition to the label that already is on their child, if they're hesitant to do that, then services are limited. I tell families in this situation, and I see it a lot, I say, you're already living with it. Give it a name and get resources, both for yourself and for your child's siblings. Don't be afraid of another label. The situation has to be manageable for everyone. The situation has to be manageable for everyone. And I know I'm saying something that seems impossible at times for different families and different situations, but it's got to be manageable for everyone. So, for example, in the chapter titled Protecting My Space, I recount the story of Jonathan's habit of destroying some of Rebecca's belongings. So what do? I installed deadbolts on her bedroom door, the parents' bedroom door, and Jonathan's toy closet. It worked beautifully. And I was talking about this in a workshop once, and a parent said, oh, wouldn't that be awful just to lock him out of part of the household? And I said, are you kidding? No, it respects other family members. It respects other family members. Jonathan couldn't control his behavior, so we controlled it for him where we could. And installing deadbolts on our doors was one way we could. So now I'm going to let Wendy ask me some questions.
Hi there, Natalie. So tell me, was there any help through the schools for your daughter when she started having these feelings that were difficult for her to process.
No, and here's another heads up I want to give everybody. So very often, and everybody, I know there are lots of families that will relate to this. Very often, the sibling, the neurotypical sibling, is a super overachiever, and a smile on the face, and they're just doing great. Underneath, they're not doing great, and I regret that I didn't prod further with Rebecca. I mean, now she needs therapy, but she's so busy with her workload at the university, teaching and all of that, that's not high on her priority list, but it's going to get there. She will get to that. Now, when she was young, I thought I was aware. So when she was about 3 years old and starting to have trouble, I gave her, we did a lot of art. So I gave her, some paper and crayons, and I said, draw a picture of our family. And so she drew a big picture, and she said, that's me, stick figures, right? And then another big one, that's mom, and a little bit smaller, that's dad. And then way up in the corner, about the size of an ant, she drew another little stick figure. I said, what's that? She said, that's Jonathan.
Oh.
And at other times, I had her draw a picture of, show me how you're feeling. And she picked up a big red crayon and made this really angry, picture of herself. And then she waited a minute or so, and then she turned the page over and she said, but this is me now. And then she did this very happy picture, with the sun is shining and the flowers are out. So I thought I was dealing with it. And then when she was about 5 and things were starting to get, because he was showing the ADHD part from the age of about 3. So when she was about 5 and couldn't write yet, I sat down at the computer and I stood her by me. I said, tell me how you feel and I will write it out. And so tell me, well, I'm angry at Jonathan because he blah, 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 blah. So I wrote it all out and I said, now let's read it. So I read it out, kept it, saved. So I thought I was handling that. But her personality was such a people pleaser, smile when you would rather scream, kill it at school, straight A's, knock yourself out. And we find that very often especially if they're, very often if they're 2 and one sibling is neurotypical and the other one has disabilities, the neurotypical one will be off the charts as far as achieving, whether they are trying to make up for the fact that the sibling can't, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist.
Right.
But we do find that.
Yeah.
So no, she didn't get any help at school. She didn't get any help from the books because sugarcoat or depress. And so I just tried to manage it at home and do the things I write about in the book, give her special time with mom. We just go out to an Italian restaurant or whatever, special time with dad. I was not as aware as looking back, I wish I had been more aware. I wish I had taken her to therapy when she was 7. I don't care.
Right.
Whatever.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Right.
Our daughter is 32 and still hasn't verbalized her anger against her youngest sister with autism. So, those things that happen as children often just drag along with us as we get older. Now, you used to take her out for dinner. You used to do some art projects. And you also brought to the forefront her feelings. Has she ever said to you what more could have been done? Because to me, that sounds like a pretty good plan.
Yeah, it is. It is. She hasn't. She just feels that at this age, at 35, she needs to work it through with a therapist.
Yeah.
And as she said, I love Jonathan, but I don't like him.
So tell me about Jonathan now.
Okay. Well, we have been incredibly fortunate. About 2.5 years ago, Jonathan's caregiver changed. He got amazing vouchers in Cincinnati
Mhm.
when he was 22. His dad and I had divorced, which had nothing to do with the disability, believe it or not. It had to, it was an entirely different topic. But when we divorced and we were living in Cincinnati, that's where I raised him. And I was in connection with the regional center. And I called his facilitator and I said, look, Bill, I want to move to California where my relatives are, where my church is based, et cetera. And he said, oh, well, we can bump Jonathan up to the top of the list. That's an emergency situation if one parent is out of state. And I had him on the list since he was 16. And they said, no, there's no money. There's not enough housing, blah, blah, blah. But when I said I'm moving, they said, oh, well, okay. And so he was grandfathered in. Those vouchers are scarce, and I understand that. So right now it's very difficult. But he got grandfathered in, and he loved the idea of being in his own apartment because he had visited his sister's apartment. So at 22, when I moved to California, he moved into an apartment, and because we had vouchers for the caregiving company. So we did not have to pay for that, thank God, or we would not have been able to.
Yeah.
So we hired a caregiving company, and we were not happy with the caregivers for a number of years.
Mhm.
Started out with a good caregiver, she quit, then through the company, then we had okay. And then we had a really not okay caregiver. And finally, we got the caregiver from heaven. Jonathan is very drawn to father figures. And so the caregiver he has now, whose name is Omar from Northwest Africa, is 20 years older than Jonathan. He has a strong accent. Jonathan's hard to understand. And by golly, they understand each other. Do not ask me how.
Yeah, that does a mother's heart good, though.
I know. It's like, what did he say?
So tell me, as Jonathan was growing up, and all right, there's his downs, and ADHD kind of tags along too. What limitations besides the locks? Tell me about what you did to equalize the playing field for Jonathan, and how his sister was viewing all of this as well. Do you know what I mean? Were there consequences for Jonathan?
Oh my gosh, yes. I should mention I've written another book called Down Syndrome Parenting 101, must-have advice for making your life easier. And there's a chapter in there titled How to Ruin Your Child. And that's easy. Don't give them chores. Don't give them consequences. Don't make them work.
Mhm.
So, at the age of, yes, he had consequences. That was one of the ways that I managed his behavior. But there are 2 more chapters in that Down syndrome parenting book about just controlling the oppositional behavior. He was so oppositional that I read books. I tried one method after another, and it would work for a while, and then it'd catch on, and then I'd have to figure out another one.
Yeah.
And so I became an expert in techniques, of how to handle oppositional behavior, but consequences were huge. Absolutely.
Did he get the connection?
Oh yeah. Because one of my points in my parenting book is the consequences have to appear 10 seconds after he did it, not a minute later. He's not going to connect that. It's bam, instantaneous. Yes. And chores. So yeah, he was very limited as far as fine motor, but could he sort the laundry into darks and light? Yeah. So he did. Could he learn to vacuum? Yeah. But when he first vacuumed, my first lesson, he just went right over all the electrical cords, a little bit in the middle of the room. He said, I'm done. I said, oh no. So eventually he could vacuum the house as well as I could. And so that was his job. That was one of his jobs.
I think the easiest way to grow animosity between siblings is to treat one differently than the other. And despite the disability, there are ways to make your child understand.
Absolutely.
Yes, I talk with parents every day whose 23 or 24-year-old child has, it's like an inertia. And they had a neurotypical child, and then they have this young adult with autism, and they've babied him throughout his life. And now that he's 21 and doesn't want to get off the Game Boy and look for a job or anything. Well,
Right.
it started years ago.
Way back.
And not only, I mean, he's not the one suffering, obviously. His life
No.
is perfect.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the other siblings that are wondering, when is Johnny going to get up and be the kind of adult that he can be?
Right.
So I think you were spot on about not growing animosity by treating them differently.
Oh, no, no. Right, right, right. And I had little coupons. Okay, if they did their chores, they had a 20, in those days we watched videos. Okay, so it said 20 minutes of video. So they'd get a coupon.
Well, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And they could either keep 2 or 3 of them and then have a whole hour or not. But yeah, they were identical. I treated them identically as far as that's concerned, as far as chores.
Has your daughter, as a child, ever wondered who would take care of Jonathan when, not as a child, maybe as a teen? Did she ever question that?
No, I think she figured it out.
Okay.
No, she just knew. And then we both her dad and I have special needs trusts made up.
Yes.
And she's the executor and she knows about all of that. But like I said earlier, I was very careful not to make her responsible for him growing up. I just think that's wrong.
That's a huge weight. That's a huge weight.
Huge. And it makes me so sad when I see, especially on an intake interview, if I'm taking in a student that had for reading, he comes in with the family, the mom, and maybe the siblings, and the kid starts tearing apart my office. And I look at the sibling and there's this, oh my God, there's this, and I'm thinking, first of all, excuse me, this child needs a diagnosis. It's not just Down syndrome. I mean, you have to be very careful and gentle and how you say, there might be something else going on here. I recommend that you take him in for a multidisciplinary evaluation and, see if there's something else. But, to see the effect on the siblings when it's just, he's got carte blanche. He can just do whatever. And, the reason I hooked into this so early, I think my daughter was 3.5 and Jonathan was 5. And I realized I was raising 2 spoiled brats because I didn't require anything of them. And just around that time, Reader's Digest, remember that book, that magazine a long time ago, came out with an article, a research article that had been done over 20 years. And they were trying to find out what's the secret of happiness. So they had done this massive study, different backgrounds, different education background, different races, et cetera. They found only one common denominator. And that was that the happy adults had all been made to work in the family, to carry their weight, to be responsible.
There you go.
Yeah. And I remember Jonathan, because he also had to sort with the recycling. And I can remember him standing in my kitchen, sorting the recycling while he's going, no sort recycling, no, while he's doing the chore, and invariably when he finished the chore, and he's complaining the whole time, when he finished the chore, he'd get this big smile and he'd go off to his room to play because he earned it.
Yep. There is research out there that shows that neurotypical siblings of brothers and sisters who have autism in particular go 2 ways when they grow up. They have either found this well of empathy because of everything they had living with them and all of the emotional situations around that disability, and they are more secure, often find jobs in the disability field, and a lot more understanding of general public. It's either that or they're bitter.
Yeah.
And I think, and boy, oh boy, I don't know if I was one of those parents, because I have kids on both sides of that fence.
Yeah.
That is hard. That is hard to walk that line as a parent.
Yep.
To allow them to gain some knowledge from this experience without turning bitter.
Yeah. And so much of that is actually up to the spirit of the neurotypical child themselves.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
what is their personality base, or what are, you know, how do they handle things?
Yeah.
As parents, we can't really control that, you know.
So what was the situation? Did she want to have friends over?
Yeah, now that's, yeah, I have a chapter on that in the Oh Brother book, that it actually enabled her to kind of ferret out her friends. Those who said, oh, he's weird, you know, did not stay friends.
Mhm.
And those who came over and, you know, say, hey, Jonathan's pretty cool. Boy, he hears my name one time and he's got it forever. He never forgets my name, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, the friends she chose were very empathetic.
Good. Now we had a question from someone who registered. I like this question. How do they minimize the damage, I guess, of sometimes the craziness in a household of having a neurotypical with a child with disabilities? How do you minimize the damage of what that atmosphere was like to let that neurotypical child know that this household was not usually how everybody grows up? You know, how do you minimize is there a way to let them realize that you grew up in a very specific way because of your sibling?
Well, I think if I understand your question correctly, early sleepovers at friends' homes, seeing their families is a big plus. And then talking about, you know, why it is so different at our house.
Yeah.
But letting them see that, and hopefully being in a situation where they can grow up with and see those families grow up as well and still have the contact. That happened for my daughter. She was blessed in that every summer of her whole life, we lived in northern Michigan at a music festival because her dad is a performer.
Excuse me.
And 8 feet away down the hall was a family of 3 neurotypical kids. And they grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
So, and are still very, very close, and everybody's got kids now and all of that. But that was, so she had another family in a sense. And I don't think, she never questioned to me, like, why is it different? She just knew. She was kind of, you know, what I call an old soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My daughter came home from a sleepover once and said, Mom, our family's a mess. And of course, I dropped whatever I was doing, and immediately we had a conversation. I
Right.
took her outside where nobody else had to overhear. And I said, well, tell me why you said that. What makes our family a mess? Well, Lily's always screaming, or she's having a meltdown here. And she goes, nobody in that other family did. And it was just another way to reiterate Lily's condition. And how we have to remain calm so Lily can hopefully remain calm. That doesn't mean that you don't tell me how you feel, but she has a different set of needs than we do because of this disability. And that worked for a while, you know, until she went to another sleepover. And, you know, but it was a continuous conversation throughout the years. When Lily was adopted from China, so when she came home and she was diagnosed with autism 2 years later, that was a family conversation.
Yeah.
And it was always open to questions and comments. They would whisper the questions to me over the dinner table, like, is that normal? Is that her autism? No, Lily, close your mouth, please. Yeah. But I guess that would be another, in addition to equalizing the playing field, is to keep the conversation going.
Yeah,
Mhm. Because the condition will change as the child grows,
yes.
you know.
And our questions will change as, you know, as
Sure,
you grow, right?
sure.
One thing that I did, which I was able to do only because I only had 2 kids, and that was I was very, very close to my daughter. Now, Jonathan didn't need for me to be with him to help put him to sleep. You know, I read aloud to the kids at night, but then he was like on his own, and
Yeah.
I would get in Becca's bed and curl up and would have our ritual and all of that. So a very, very close relationship with her, I think, helped a lot.
Was there a time, do you remember sitting down with her when she could understand and you explained Jonathan and his Down syndrome?
I'd have to ask her that because I don't remember a conversation. Just the conversations were about his behavior. She
Okay,
could see that he was different. And that's another thing where I think having him with Down syndrome is easier than autism, because autism there are not the obvious features
Yeah.
that tell everybody around them, oh, okay, yeah, he has Down syndrome.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So our conversations were about the behavior and trying to deal with that and trying to protect her from it. For instance, we had to buy a van. We only had 2 kids, but Jonathan needed to be isolated in the back all by himself when we would take trips and such like that.
Because of his behaviors.
Yes, I had to put her further away from that.
Mhm.
She didn't have to deal with it close up. It was very important. I mean, it's
Sure.
stupid to have a van for 4 people, but we had to do that.
Yeah.
Because of the behavior.
I get that. As we close and we welcome questions, I want to ask you one last question from me. What's a piece of advice that you wish you had gotten about raising a neurotypical child with a disability, that you have learned now through the years?
Get her therapy at an early age. No, really, because I think our kids don't want to burden mom and dad. They see us struggling already. So if they're going to tell us about, their struggles, their negative feelings, they think it's just going to add to more stress for the parents. But I think if you can find the right match, the right counselor, the right therapist, where they get to, over a period of a little bit of time, to trust that person and to feel like they can say these things that they really wouldn't want to say in front of mom and dad, and have the therapist help them through that.
Yeah.
I wish, I would have, hindsight, when she was around 7, I think I would have tried to initiate that and see how it felt to her.
Get some of those feelings out in words.
Yeah, with a third safe person,
Mhm.
not in the family.
Okay. I would encourage anybody with questions to put them in the chat, and we can address them with Natalie at this time. No questions? You did a good job, Natalie. Okay, this presentation has been recorded. So if you go to autismakron.org in about a week and a half, it'll be part of our educational library that you can watch it over and over again, or refer a friend to it, or share it with a friend. Natalie, I want to thank you for your words of wisdom and for your experience as a parent. What you recommended was priceless. And I'm sure everybody that listened to it can understand the little innuendos about being a parent with somebody who has a disability as well as someone who doesn't. So thank you for your time. I would encourage anybody to go pick up Natalie's book if you're interested. And I look forward to seeing you in another webinar, probably sometime in September. Thank you so much. You have a great evening.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Wendy.
Bye, Natalie.
Bye-bye.